Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I want to talk about the 6 Divination cards that are known so far that will be coming in the upcoming 3.10 Delirium expansion. Delirium launches on either the 13th or the 14th of March, depending on where you are in the world. So the 14th for me over in Australia. And the Divination cards are an interesting thing. They're something that a lot of players can pay very little attention to, especially if you're in solo self-found. Most of these cards will be pretty hard to compile a set of. However, there's always exceptions. And what they can do is one of 3 real things. The first thing that they can do is they can smash the price of a particular item. If you've played for a few leagues, you might remember that the Flask Soul Ripper was about 60 Exalted Orbs in the Legion League. That was because it was really good in that league. Not for every build, but for builds that were dedicated around maximizing the potential of Vaal Ice Nova. It was absolutely an incredible flask, and it was exceedingly rare. The very next league added a Divination card for it, and consequentially, that flask is now usually available at about the 9 to 10 Exalt range most of the time in a mature league, as opposed to 60 beforehand. This is just because there's a lot more people that have access to the flask, but also there's a lot of people that come across it somewhat by accident. They're running a map, and I think that one drops in Vaal Temple, so it's not a common drop. But you're running a Vaal Temple because you just want to get it done on your Atlas. And then you hear your loot filter make the, oh my god, you just found an Exalted Orb sound. And you see a Divination card you're not familiar with. So you go, okay, my loot filter thinks this is good, I don't know what it is, so I'm going to check it out. And then you have a look at pricing online and you go, oh wow, I just found a Divination card that's worth an Exalt and a half. You price it for 1.4 Exalts and you get 25 trade bots PM you immediately wanting to buy it. So, that's what one of the things that Divination cards can do. The second thing that they can do is that they can incentivize playing content you otherwise wouldn't play. One really good example of this is some of the Divination cards that come from Betrayal monsters. There is Nook's Crown, which drops from Katarina herself, the Mastermind. There's also a number of them that are linked to specific Syndicate members. Now, you might have otherwise decided to keep these Syndicate members out of your Syndicate, but then, if the Divination cards drop often enough, they can feel like a meaningful reason to keep those members around. Likewise for bad or mediocre maps. So you can have a mediocre map like Tower, or a slightly above average map like Burial Chambers suddenly becomes hugely popular because it has a top tier Divination card in it. So the Tower drops the Nurse Divination card, Burial Chambers drops the Doctor. Both of these are components for getting a Headhunter, and so they're in huge demand. Likewise, the Lava Lake map, the boss of it, drops the Demon, which is Divination card for a 2 implicit corrupted Headhunter. All of these Divination cards are ones that make you feel like there's a purpose to farming some content you otherwise might not have done so. And probably the most iconic example of this is the Tabula Rasa Divination card, Humility, which drops in the Aqueducts, the Blood Aqueducts, the Channel map, and the Waterways map, all of which suddenly become really worth running, even more so than they otherwise would be. The third purpose of Divination cards that can be really significant is to provide a deterministic or semi-deterministic way to get a genuinely rare item in solo self-found play. And the absolute poster child Divination card that I would name for this is the one for the Wand Obliteration. Obliteration is worthless in a trade league. It's not the most common wand, and it's not that commonly wanted. So whilst it's only of average rarity, demand's pretty low, but it's very build defining, and the chaos damage explosions that it causes are amazing for the right build. If you're planning to make a build that is going to use these chaos damage explosions, then the fact that this Divination card exists and that you know that you can get it in the Delve Mines by looking in chests that are off the beaten path, then you know that you can find yourself one of these some of these cards and eventually farm up an Obliteration wand. So, without any further ado, let's talk about these 6 Divination cards revealed so far. Firstly is the newest one, the Strategist. Inspired Learning is a jewel that is extremely powerful and also often forgotten by players. It is the mini Headhunter jewel. It actually has a really high opportunity cost. You need to give up a jewel slot for the Inspired Learning jewel. And in its small radius, you need to allocate 4 notable passive nodes in that radius. You can't even do this in every single socket on the passive tree. There are only 6 spots that you can do it. But the 4 notables that you allocate, they're probably at least okay. You get some benefit from them. And you get this huge ability of whenever you kill a rare monster, you gain 1 of its mods for 20 seconds. The reason this is so powerful is that rare monster mods are so incredibly strong in this game. At the best end, you get Soul Eater. Soul Eater causes every monster that dies around you to basically increase all of your stats by 5% for a period of time. But even if you don't get Soul Eater, there's things like auras that give you energy shield equal to, I think it's half of your life. There is a Vaal Haste aura, which is like Vaal Haste except on steroids. I think it's 50% increased movement and action speed. There's the monster version of increased critical strikes, which is just nuts. So all of these mods are really strong. The power for Inspired Learning comes when you can stack multiple copies of this jewel with itself, and also stack them with Headhunter. Inspired Learning is a tier 1 rarity unique. So what that means is it's in the rarest category of unique items that can drop anywhere in the game. It's the same rarity as Kalm's Heart or Chevron's Wrappings, at least we believe, or Mjolnir, and also the same rarity as a few much less popular unique items that just still happen to be at that rarity. Anyways, this Divination card also has a Vaal implicit corruption on it. So you'll see here that it says Corrupted. On Divination cards, that means that it will have 1 corruption on it, and there is a very powerful corruption that jewels can get. That jewel corruption is the Corrupting Blood cannot be inflicted on you. If you turn in a set of the Strategist and you get Corrupting Blood immunity on an Inspired Learning, you have got something very, very, very special. But even if you miss that, you're going to get you're going to get a powerful build around the item. Now I'm expecting that this Strategist Divination card will be quite rare. I'm expecting that it might appear in otherwise unpopular tile sets. It's kind of hard to say from the theme of the Divination card's artwork. It does look like a library, but it also looks like some sort of battlefront as well. It's really hard to say what exactly is going on and whether that's linked in any ways to where it might end up dropping in-game. The one place that I think this thematically would fit would be the Atlas of Worlds room in the Temple of Atzoatl. So that is the 3rd tier mapped room. There's just this feeling to that room of exploration of charts that are laid out on display, and people looking around. So that's one thing that I've had in mind as a thought of where it might drop, but that's pure speculation and it's solely based on the art. In any case, we will find out once people start reporting where this drops. Next up we have Council of Cats. Now, Council of Cats gives a Farrul item. Farrul is the rarest of the 4 bestiary bosses, so they are something that you can normally get only through Einhar missions, and then when you find the right beast, going and fighting them in the beast crafting altar. And if you win that fight, you'll then get to go and encounter them in their lair. Then you go and fight them in their lair, which is just like a unique map that you get portals to via a weird method. And they will always drop 1 unique item that's linked to them. Now, there are 4 different Farrul items, and it is my belief, this is not proven, but it's my belief that they have a 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 drop ratio. So you have a 10% chance of getting Farrul's fur, 20% chance of getting the hat, 30% and 40% for the gloves and the boots in some order that I don't know. Now, these Farrul items are very much concentrated in power in one of them, and that is Farrul's fur. There is already a Divination card for this item, Farrul's fur, that can drop from prior to the first ones, which is something that from memory drops in the Pit of the Chimera. Farrul's fur is incredibly powerful. You need to get Aspect of the Cat from somewhere. You can either get that by equipping the Farrul's Bite unique helmet, which will give you the ability to use Aspect of the Cat, or you can get it by using Beast Crafting to add it as a mod to one of your rare items. Your reward for doing this is that Aspect of the Cat reserves a no mana, and when you've got it, essentially you will have full frenzy charges and full power charges while you have Aspect of the Cat reserved, as long as you have at least a small investment in maximum duration for both of those types of charges. This is really, really powerful given that there's a low opportunity cost for this chest. It's already got stats you care about anyway. Huge chunk of life. It's just one of the best pieces of armor in the game. Additionally, the other Farrul items exist as well. They're nowhere near as exciting. There's the gloves, which involve you dealing bleeds on enemies. There's the boots, which have pretty mediocre stats, but give you resistance to bleeding. And there is the helmet, which gives you some critical strike, and is not a bad helmet itself. So overall, what do I think of this Divination card? This is going to be something that is going to further increase the amount of Farrul's furs in the economy. This is going to mean that if it is more realistic to make a build around the Farrul items than it has been in the past. They've been very rare in the past. Farrul's fur has at times been as much as 25 Exalted Orbs. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that Farrul's fur, given that there's now an additional source of it, I wouldn't be surprised to see it sort of drop down to the 6 to 8 Exalted Orb range. So this means if you're the sort of player that runs 500 maps in a league, you can aspire to owning a Farrul set if you want to do so. If you're the sort of player that runs 2,000 maps in a league, then you can definitely get this. There's no question to it. On the flip side, I don't think that you're going to want to turn this set in very often unless you've got a high stomach for variance. As I was saying before, I think that there's a 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 ratio in the drops, which means you've got a 1 in 10 chance of getting Farrul's fur from Farrul, the actual fight. I expect that this Divination card will respect that, and so you're only going to get Farrul's fur 1 time in 10. I could very well be wrong on this, but it is normal that when a Divination card set can give multiple different outcomes, that it respects the weighting that those items have. So we'll have to see on that. Someone undoubtedly, possibly MB Extreme, will undoubtedly turn in 100 sets of this card, maybe more of them, and we'll get a little bit of data that will help pin that down, but that's my expectations. Anyways, I'll be keen to see this. I don't think this is going to be an expensive Divination card, but it's not going to be cheap either. Think of this as being like no, it's going to be more than 10 Chaos. I think of this as being maybe a 20 Chaos Divination card. So it's going to be something you're always happy to see, but it's not going to be the sort of thing that goes, oh, you know what, that drop made my entire play session. Whereas the Strategist will do that. Next up we have the Progeny of Lunaris. This had a really touching story behind it that the commissioner of the card actually posted to Reddit the other day. Essentially, really simple concept though, Dying Sun. The unique flask that comes from the Shaper, and it's actually not a very common drop from the Shaper. This is going to be a way to farm this. I don't know where this is going to drop. If I was going to hazard a guess, it would be that it drops from Lunaris, the map version of Lunaris. Now, the map version of Lunaris is found in the Twilight Temple unique map. So I would hazard a guess that that's where it's going to drop, but that is just me speculating. You only need a set of 2. This is going to be really interesting. It's also going to mean that the first few Dying Suns, when a league starts, the first few of them are going to come from Divination cards rather than from people killing the Shaper. So you'll see people before they go into the Shaper for the first time, right at the start of the league, they'll be able to pick up 2 copies of this Divination card through trade, and then get themselves a Dying Sun and use that for the first Shaper kill. I think that this Divination card will be borderline impossible to compile a set of in solo self-found. I think it's going to be one that's trade league only because the Dying Sun unique flask is, whilst it's not staggeringly rare, it's not particularly common either. I've had about 6 of them drop for me ever, and that includes a fair bit of running the Shaper in the last league when I decided that I was going to get the Celestial Hideout. And so I think you'll find that this is not going to be a super common drop. On the other side, something that's important about the Shaper is that the Shaper drops Uber Elder fragments, and the 2 that drop from the Shaper are the limiting factors in opening the Uber Elder encounter. And we'll go back to the Uber Elder encounter in a second. There is an insatiable demand in the trade league economy for Watcher's Eyes. This means that once the league matures a bit, there will be a lot of Dying Suns that are being produced almost as a waste product. People are running the Shaper because they want access to Uber Elder. and they will also be picking up some of the Shaper's loot, but they're really there because they want the Uber Elder Watcher's Eyes. For that reason, I think you'll find that Dying Suns will get very cheap in this league, and also into the future. This will take a little bit of time because this flask is so good that people are going to want it early on. Next up we have the Tinkerer's Table. This one is going to be interesting. So it drops 5 fossils. There is an enormous amount of variance on this. If you get unlucky, you might wind up with 5 aberrant fossils. Now, aberrant fossils have their uses. They're not dumpster tier or anything like it, but they're just in lower demand than a lot of the other fossils. If you get quite lucky, then you might get 5 serrated fossils. Serrated fossils are pretty common actually, but the demand for them is incredibly high because they are just so incredibly good. At least assuming that they don't see any further nerfs. They've been nerfed already. They were nerfed before 3.9. They may be nerfed again, but even if they don't get nerfed, they're still, well, even if they do get nerfed, they could still be good. But even if they don't get nerfed, they're going to be great. Then, at the rarer side, you could get something like 5 Sanctified Fossils, which will be an Exalt and a half in most leagues, or 5 Bloodstained Fossils could be, early in the league, that could be 10 Exalts. Now, I'm expecting that this will roughly follow the distribution of fossils that drop through normal gameplay. So I think you will commonly see the fossils that can drop out in the open. So prismatic fossils, pristine fossils, serrated fossils, aberrant fossils, those sorts. We'll less commonly see the fossils that only drop behind fractured walls, so gilded fossils, encrusted fossils, or sanctified at the good end, and you will almost never see the top tier fossils, the rarest ones, which include both the very powerful hollow fossil and the very weak tangled fossil. That's my expectation. However, it's entirely possible that GGG might decide to make all the fossils an equal chance, in which case this Divination card will be considerably rarer to compensate for that. I do think that this is going to mean that there will be a lot of opportunities to just pick up 5 of the same fossil a lot easier. Trading for fossils is a pain in the ass because most people that have them, or at least most people selling them, tend to sell them in small numbers. There'll be people that have bulk amounts, but most people sell them in small numbers, and it's just such a pain to buy them. So having them in bulk will be great, and I'm looking forward to probably turning in a bunch of sets of this myself over the next league. Next up we have the Eldritch Decay. I think I mentioned Uber Elder Fragments before when I was talking about the Dying Sun Divination card. This is going to be one of the most impactful Divination cards for Trade League players. The reason for that is that if you have a look at what happened when the Sambodi's Vaal Divination card was added. Sambodi's Vaal is a Divination card that drops from members of the Immortal Syndicate, and it provides a random mortal fragment. So these are the Uber Atsuri fragments, the ones that are used not to access the normal version of the Atsuri encounter, the monster level 71, the Apex of Sacrifice, but to access the monster level 80 Alluring Abyss. So that's the Uber Atsuri fragments that drop from Sambodi's Vaal. Now, when that was introduced, previously Mortal Ignorance had been the most expensive part of that set. It's my belief, again, I could be wrong on this, but it's my belief that the Rage, Grief, Ignorance, and Hope follow a 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 drop ratio in that order. So actually, Ignorance is not the rarest to drop is Mortal Hope. However, the fact that Mortal Hope was the rarest led to it being the first one to get a Divination card. And so there's a Last Hope Divination card which drops quite a lot in Vaal Temple. And with a lot of people running Vaal Temple, this means that there's lots and lots and lots of Last Hopes and hence Mortal Hopes in the economy. Overall, across the economy, Mortal Ignorance is the rarest, and it has been for some leagues. When the Sambodi's Vaal Divination card was added, all of a sudden, the price of Mortal Ignorance in leagues started dropping from around 80 Chaos Orbs beforehand to around 20. And that's because there's just so many more of them available. So, I'm expecting that the Eldritch Decay might do something very similar. It does depend where it drops from. but if it drops anywhere target farmable, now I'm not expecting this to be a particularly common divination card to see, but even if it drops anywhere significant, I think we will see a lot more Uber Elder fragments in circulation. This means more access to the Uber Elder fight, which is good because it's a fun fight, and it's sort of a bit dicey with it costing 3 exalts to get a set at the moment. It's pretty difficult to learn it. This might get that price down from 3 exalts to a bit lower. One thing that's very important as well is that any decrease in the price of an Uber Elder admission ticket, aka an Uber Elder set, is going to cause the price of Watcher's Eyes to fall. Whilst the cost of an Uber Elder set has been 3 exalts for most of the Metamorph League, the value of an Uber Elder unidentified Watcher's Eye was it 13 exalts for much of the league. Now, once you identify them, you're taking a huge gamble. You might get something that's rubbish and that's only worth an exalt or 2, or you might get something that's outstanding and is worth many, many mirrors, or most of the time you get something in between. However, the 13 exalts for an unidentified Uber Elder Watcher's Eye, which is one with item level 86, that's going to fall. That is going to be very close to 4 times the price of admission to Uber Elder. So wherever it ends up, wherever the price ends up, that'll affect the Watcher's Eyes. Anyways, that's the Eldritch Decay. I'm looking forward to this card just simply because it means that you'll be able to have more shots at Uber Elder, especially if you're trying to learn the fight. Last up, we have the Cheetah. Now, this is a really interesting one. I love the art for this card. What you see here, and I believe that this is a reference to the story of the that's told during the Labyrinth. You'll know that there's the warrior and the magician that go through there, and at the end, one of them backstabs the other. And yeah, you can find that story if you click on the poems inside there. You'll find all of those stories, and it'll be able to put together the entire story of who wins. Anyways, what we've got here is the story that's being told to the masses. You've got all these people that are absolutely praising this cheetah, this character here, holding the sword and holding the severed head of a monster. And here we see what actually happened. We've got the adored hero standing over the corpse of the companion that he stabbed in the back, alongside the corpse of the monster that the hero killed. So, there's a strong labyrinth theme here to the artwork of the card, and there's also a reference to shortcuts here. Now, there's 2 things that this card could be a reference to. The first one is the continual scandals related to the Eternal Labyrinth. Now, in the Eternal Labyrinth, there is a little known about feature where the fastest completion on any given day is awarded a specific jewel. This is the only way that you can get this jewel. It's stupendously expensive in trade. And when I say stupidly expensive, I mean like literally 100 exalts. And it is potentially best in slot for Baron summoners at the moment. Now, there's been a bit of a scandal over recent times on Reddit. I'm not going to comment on the truth or otherwise of this, but there's been accusations that the player that consistently wins this race may have been using map hack cheats or other cheating software to facilitate their runs. So, for that reason, I think that's where the name the Cheetah comes from. And sometimes the best way to achieve greatness is to use a shortcut. There's another thing that's little known about the Labyrinth, and that is that when you click a Dark Shrine, sometimes it opens a portal directly to Azaro. Not to the 3rd Azaro, if you're not yet up to it. It's just to the next Azaro. It's like to the next Aspirant's Trial. I have a sneaking suspicion that this Divination card is going to be a reward for killing Azaro after having had one of these shortcuts inside the Labyrinth. Now that's me speculating only. In terms of the actual reward, a level 6 Awakened Support Gem, 20 quality. Notice it's 20 and not 23, so there's been a decision made not to go with the absolutely perfect outcome, decision to go with the second best. However, Awakened Support Gems vary in value tremendously, but one thing that's important with them is that leveling them to 6 is a big deal. Leveling them to 5 takes about 2 billion gem experience. For comparison, leveling a Herald of Ice to 20 takes about 360 million. So you're looking about 5.5 or 6 times the gem experience necessary to level a normal gem in order to get it to 5. Then, in order to get it to 6/20, you need to corrupt it and get lucky. So, getting it to 6/20 is a big deal. 2 billion gem XP is probably about maybe 1,200 to 1,500 maps. So you're going to have that item equipped for a very, very, very long time, or that gem equipped for a very long time, and that's just to get it to 5. So there's not that many level 6 Awaken support gems in circulation. As well as that, you have to actually have the Awaken support gem that you want drop. So for those reasons, I'm expecting this Divination card to be very rare. I'm also expecting it to be a very valuable turn-in. And that brings us to the topic of stacked decks. Stacked decks are a currency that people will have undoubtedly picked up if you've been playing through the Metamorph League. When you open one, you get a random Divination card. And whilst these Divination cards are often garbage, they are weighted somewhat favourably towards you. The creator of the stacked deck, it was actually created as a player-submitted unique back when GGG allowed commissioning of unique items. The creator of the stacked deck says that their original intention was for the stacked deck to have an equal chance for every Divination card in the game. And that because of the existence of cards like House of Mirrors, GGG vetoed that, but then found a middle ground where the item has a different weighting to what normal items have. So where normal items will have a weighting system where, for instance, you might have 10 as the weighting to get a certain card and 10,000 to get another one. This would mean that if those 2 Divination cards were eligible to drop in one spot, you'd have a 10 in 10,010 chance, aka 1 in 1,001, to get the first of the cards, and a 10,000 in 10,010, or 99.9% roughly, slightly more than 99.9%, to get the second one. Now, what the stacked decks do is they use the same system, but they take the square root of the weightings. So if, for example, the Divination card, the Doctor, were to be 40,000 times rarer, 40,000 times rarer, than the Divination card, the Gambler, and both were eligible to drop from the same monster. So then, from a stacked deck, instead of 40,000 times rarer, it would be 200 times rarer. So the square root of 40,000. What this means is that stacked decks have a disproportionately good chance to drop the best cards in the game. They still mostly drop garbage because the weighting is still much higher, even with this bias. They still drop a lot more Gamblers than they do, say, Doctors. But they're biased in your favour. Every new Divination card that's introduced that is very rare and very high value, like the Cheetah will be, increases the potential value of stacked decks. For this reason, partly for this reason, but also partly because the next league is going to potentially have a lot of uses for Headhunter in it, I'm actually expecting that stacked decks might be more valuable than they've been in the Metamorph League. You might even see them go as high as they did in Legion, where people were paying, people were buying them in large bulk for 9 chaos each. If that happens, if you're variance averse, then you should just go, oh, a bunch of stacked decks, fantastic, I'm just going to keep them until I've got enough to sell an Exalt worth at once, and then I'm just going to sell them off to other players. If, on the other hand, you like a little bit of variance, then you can just open them all and watch as your dreams are crushed by the cruel reality of random number generation. Anyways, that's the Divination cards revealed so far. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you have a good one.